Hi, Megan and Savannah. We've gotten to chat a little here, but my name is Michael Aylward. I am a, former energy and climate policy advisor and political staffer aide, and a future one, I hope too. 8 years between 2008 and 2016, I worked in sort of a range of different jobs and kind of silos within the energy and climate world. Um, Probably a little bit more than half on national energy and climate policy and politics, and then a little bit in the industry as well. I've worked on the last four presidential campaigns. The work that I did in federal climate policy, I was a junior staffer at the White House working for President Obama's energy and climate advisor. I also worked on the House Energy and Commerce Committee on Henry Waxman's staff. So that's kind of how I came to learn about the sort of foundation and fundamentals of climate, energy, and the political issues surrounding them.
Taking into account your history in climate justice and climate policy, what do you view as the biggest threat to the climate now?
There's like political threats, there's technological threats, there's sort of business threats. These are related; they're not separate. But we could sort of talk about them, I guess, individually. And so we see that power generation and transportation are by far the largest single sources of contribution to global carbon emissions. So that means that you're not going to solve the problem without solving those two slices of the pie. Now, those aren't the only slices of the pie. That's maybe, I don't know the right number. To be honest, it fluctuates because it's hard to measure the other parts, which are like agriculture, industry, primarily.
Can you elaborate on what you understand about the science behind climate change? And so that's like how nature's interrelationships in the environment contribute to this.
So what is climate change? An unusual and unpredictable disruption of the way the world's ecosystems interact and are intertwined. So the sort of top line summary response here is, what is climate change? It is the collection of all of these impacts of increasing carbon emissions. So it is rising temperatures globally on average. It's rising temperatures much more drastically in some areas than others. It's melting ice sheets, and then some feedback loops, some things about, I should mention also, extreme weather events will be punctuated by some of these changes. Sometimes there will be more rainfall in a lower period of time, which results in floods in some places. And totally ironically, in other places, there will be complete droughts of rainfall, which will have huge disruptions on crop yields, agriculture, potential famine. We're starting to understand better how individual climatic or atmospheric drivers impact them, but then also how they affect each other. So some of them have feedback loops in the sense that when one happens, it makes others more likely, and a little bit of a cycle. So feedback loops like that are present in a bunch of places throughout the world in different types of ecosystems. And so this is all a long way of saying that what climate change is the collection of individual impact types that come from these changes in our atmosphere and how they can affect each other and potentially grow on and sort of accelerate each other.
How do humans, specifically larger corporations and the government, contribute to climate change and global warming, nationally and then on a more local and community scale?
The contributions to climate change are really principally the combustion of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas in power plants and transportation devices, cars, trucks, construction equipment, ships, and airplanes, and trains. So that's the big kahuna. If you solve that, then you have relatively little climate change sources remaining. You still have some, the agriculture piece. And then there's another part of agriculture that does it, which is the destruction of forests. Forests and other sort of natural grasslands and habitats with a lot of plants. Plants suck in carbon dioxide and they sequester them. They use them as a source of life, and they give out oxygen. So when you destroy them or you remove them, you actually take away a source of carbon sucking, which means that it stays and is not taken out of the atmosphere.
What do you view as something that can be done to alter or rebalance the state of the climate now that we're out of the equilibrium?
So we know that the United States can't fix the problem on its own, but what it can do is show how we can fix it. The United States has the whole logic of US climate action is that it's not going to solve the problem itself, but it can show, one, that a country that has historically contributed an enormous amount of the carbon that's up there, carbon that was emitted in 2000, in 1990, in 1980, in 1970, in 1960, a lot of that is from the US. One thing we can do is sort of a leadership moral role, and another thing we can do is like hey guys, if like this is actually how it works. You say you might you want to help, but you can't decarbonize your power sector. We say, we just did it in California. California is now literally, it's almost 50% renewable energy. Ultimately, these things are going to happen. The good news is that these climate improving technologies are inevitable. It's not just that they're possible, they are going to happen. Coal is going to be retired. Internal combustion engines are going to be retired. The only question is how fast. Are we going to do it on a scale that is really lackadaisical and sort of without a lot of urgency, and it's going to take a few generations? Or are we going to do it in the next 15, 20, 30 years? And by the way, in industrial time, that is an instant. We simultaneously decarbonize these sectors with enormous urgency, and then simultaneously show and give to other nations a demonstration that we know you're worried about this. Here, we're doing it. This is how we do it. Let us share some intellectual property. Let us share some, process improvements, some how this works. But also, you have to. And if you don't, there's going to be trade sanctions. Nothing against you, no offense, but we're committed to decarbonizing the world. And so if you're not going to participate, then if you want to sell some stuff to us, there's going to be a border adjustment, and there's going to be a recognition that your stuff, your cars or whatever that you're trying to sell to Germany or France or any participating nation, Brazil, the United States, are going to be reflected, and they're going to cost more because of your not participation in this process of decarbonization.
How can we, as our peers and as us, we're kids, we don't have means of transportation, we don't have money, we don't have a lot of the time the resources to live zero waste or do stuff like that? How can we kind of start to do our part and to work to bring down this just massive dystopian issue?
You could ask, one way to look at this is why haven't we been successful yet? What's been stopping us? And one of the answers to that question is that people are worried that the solutions that have been offered so far are going to hurt them and not have a big impact. They're not going to actually solve the problem. Anybody who's part of the economy that currently uses that, especially the parts that are really carbon intensive, you can imagine that when they hear the solutions that we as a country talked about for the last 10 or 15 years, they might have believed that they were aimed at them, that their jobs were going to be taken away. And they might even be sympathetic to these ideas, but they don't want their livelihoods to be, they feel they have responsibilities to their families, to their communities. So the reason I mention all of this is one of the superpowers we can provide is compassion. We can make it clear that that this problem affects us all, and that we recognize the solutions have to work for everybody. It's the actual people, the workers, and the people who feel they'll be affected by proposed solutions that we have to be relentlessly compassionate for. We have to make sure that the way we speak and the way we believe and the way that we think about solutions makes it clear. It doesn't leave any doubt that we're not leaving anyone behind. The people who built this country's railroads and coal mines and oil refineries and internal combustion engine plants, even though they are problems that we have to solve and that we have to, as a country, move away from them, that doesn't mean that those people who did those things are any less worthy of our appreciation. They helped build the prosperity that we have as a country, and we have to honor that. We have to make sure that they don't think we have any intention or desire to leave them behind. The reason I say this in how do we solve this issue is that it helps us broaden the coalition of people who support it. If everybody knows that they have a place and that they're not going to be demonized or left behind, then it makes the popular support and the sense of who can win and who will not lose by joining this, it makes that too broad to ignore. The only reason that we have not won yet is that we haven't achieved that broadness yet. What's happened is the fossil fuel companies and opponents of climate action have been able to drive a wedge. They've been able to convince some people that climate proposals and solutions are going to harm them. And so they actually convince them that they can't afford to accept them or to support them. If they ever identify those trade-offs, if they ever find those trade-offs where it feels like honoring people means sacrificing environmental goals, that is an indication that we have a problem that we still need to solve. That means we have to solve it with policy or technology.